secret do your parents think they are keeping from you? Story 1. My mom passed away 10 years ago, the night before she sent both me and my brother a message saying she loved us. My dad says she passed in her sleep, but I'm convinced it was a suicide. I don't think he can accept that information. Story 2. My dad died of an overdose, and not just complications. I was very young when he broke his neck and he was a quadriplegic for all the time that I knew him that I can remember. The night before he died, he called me, probably about 10, 11 years old, into his room and told me that he was in pain and needed his pain pills. Because he was a quadriplegic, he was unable to get out of bed or do many things on his own, so he asked me to get the medicine out of the kitchen for him. I was young and innocent, so I did it. I brought the pill bottle to him, and I remember him taking them all. He told me he loved me and that he was proud of me and that he knew that I was surely destined for great things. I didn't understand why he was telling me all these things at the time, but I listened and then went to bed. The last time I ever saw him was the next morning, as he was carted down the hallway of our house on a stretcher by the paramedics. He died that day in the hospital. They always told me it was as a complication of his condition, and I semi-accepted it for a long time. It was only in the past few years that I put the pieces together and realized what had really happened. I had assisted my dad in committing suicide all those years ago. No matter what my family says, I'm sure of it. I've never talked to them about it, but I struggle with the thought to this day. Story 3. My dad and brother told me the reason why my dog died after being attacked by his dad's dog was that I didn't leave the car with a tank full of gas, so they had to stop for gas on their way to the vet. And they lost so much time because of that my dog didn't make it. The truth is that my dog made it to the vet and the vet said she'd be okay, but it would be about $500 for the bill. So they told the vet to just put her down because they couldn't pay. I could have paid the bill if they had told me. Story 4. I always thought my mom married my dad because of money, and my dad married my mom because she was young and hot. When they met, she was in her mid-20s and he was in his late 60s. When we went to their friends' soirees at their houses, I would see the look on the other couple's faces, but they wouldn't say anything. But I knew exactly what they were thinking. What is this young woman doing with this so much older man? She is probably with him because of his money. What a gold digger. Until one day, while I was digging through the stuff I was not supposed to touch while my mom was at work, I found a case full of letters. They were letters from my mom and my dad to each other. I spent my childhood in 2 different countries, and sometimes my dad couldn't come with us because of work. These were their love letters. Love with capital letters. They missed each other deeply, and there was even one with tear spots. They talked about how they missed each other, how they were counting the days to see each other again, how my dad would cheer for our country in the World Cup, how my brother and I were growing up too fast, and some other freaky I wish I didn't read. I felt really guilty after for thinking so low of my mom. My dad passed away and she hasn't been the same happy self she was around him. She has been in a few relationships after my dad passed away, but sometimes she catches herself calling her so my dad's nickname or preparing them breakfast the same way she used to do it for dad. They don't mind it and ignore it because it is kind of natural, because they were married for so long. But I know she wishes it was really my dad she was calling. It is heartbreaking. Story 5. My grandmother died recently and told us on her deathbed that she is a Jew who escaped the Holocaust. We knew she came from the Netherlands, but never told anyone about her life before she started a new life in the US. Raised my mom and aunt as Christians to avoid them being ridiculed or targeted in ways she feared were possible after seeing what Hitler managed to pull off. My little brother's first response was, "Does this mean we're rich?" Story 6. Apparently, I had an older brother who supposedly passed away very young. I found out one day when my grandmother let it slip out. I don't want to ask them about it because I'm sure it's a very sensitive topic. Edit. Apparently he passed before I was born. Story 7. My dad doesn't want me to know he's been helping my sister financially while I earn every one of my dollars the hard way. Edit. Holy upvotes. I haven't had this many upvotes since I reposted a picture poking fun at Final Fantasy XIV. Craziness. Story 8. I know the plastic tub I was told never to touch when I was a kid was full of toys. I may or may not have opened it out of curiosity when I was 7 or 8, so I would guess their lives. Story 9. My mom thinks we believe she quit smoking about 8 years ago, but we know what she's doing when she goes to get a soda at the gas station or when she takes the dog out. Story 10. My dad doesn't know that my mom shares everything with me, including the fact that when my grandma was young, she was a single mother of 2 young boys. She married a much older man so that when he passed away, she'd inherit all of his belongings. Story 11. They recently confessed that when I was a kid, they used to rush me off to school so they could play hours of Dr. Mario together. Edit. Quit saying this is some weird euphemism for my parents boning. Story 12. Just found my mom's weed closet. Not weed stash. She has a whole fucking plant set up in there, complete with carbon filter. I'm assuming it was not the closet she meant when I asked if she had some of my old ties. Story 13. I think my father contemplates ending his life more than ever. His wife, my mother, has been gone for 2 years now. He's lived a long and hard life at 60. Raising 6 kids at once before, where only one was his, was hard. Adopting his granddaughter, me, must have been hard when he realized how fucked up his only daughter who talked to him was. Most importantly, it must have absolutely killed him inside to lose my mother, as we all watched her slowly kill herself with alcohol. He never will forgive himself even if it wasn't at all his fault. That must he the hardest. Story 14. My dad has always been a serial cheater. On my mother, and then on my stepmother, who he was married to for most of my life. She divorced him, and we knew something bad happened but didn't know what. He died in 2016, and as the power of attorney, I was going through all his financial stuff. Sure enough, court-ordered child support payments since 2007. I found out later he knocked up a woman who was also married. He terminated his parental rights. I don't know if he knew this, but the child has Down syndrome. He looks a bit like my dad, and from the looks of this woman's Facebook profile, her and her family are very happy, and the kid is so cute. Story 15. That my bio dad isn't my dad. It's a pretty spectacular story. They got divorced when I was 6 or 7, and as part of a long, messy divorce, he asked for a paternity test. Her story is that his lawyer was super shady and paid off the blood company to say I wasn't his, so he wouldn't have to pay child support. I was young enough that while it didn't feel quite right, I believed her because she is my mom, and she framed it as a positive because now your stepdad can adopted you. As the years went on, I questioned more and more. I'm the only blonde in my family, much lighter complected, etc. She insists on her story. I do one of those 23andMe tests. My supposed bio dad was 100% polish. I am 0% polish. I ask again. She insists again, to the point of yelling, I didn't sleep with anyone else. I fall down 45, which is, great to hear from your mom. I start to get connected to cousins through 23andMe that aren't on my mom's side. I'm starting to get close to names on my own when one day my mom finally confessed to my older brother, who was giving her a hard time in my behalf. Turns out it was some guy she had worked with and had a one-night stand with. He's now married with 2 kids, who look just like me. She says he doesn't know, so I sent him a super awkward letter over the weekend. Well, see what happens now. Edit. I promise I'll keep everyone updated. I am hoping for something within the week, but I'm at his mercy, and the post offices, I guess. If it takes any longer, I am going to start getting twitchy. Edit 2. Still no response from dude. I am super twitchy about it at this point. It has been a crazy couple weeks. In addition to all this, I just found out that I am pregnant, which has been a nice distraction. Plus, I am sure adding Grandpa to the list of new news is going to make this so much easier to digest. Story 16. My dad is a baby boomer. He was a hippie child, and to this day still dabbles in recreational drug use. It's so funny because he is such a family man, runs a successful business, and in many ways is your everyday stereotypical suburban dad. You would never expect it. He only does things like LSD or shrooms on special occasions, but he does smoke weed much more regularly. I first found his weed stash when I was 11. When I was 21, he admitted to me that he smokes weed every once in a while and wanted to know if I was interested in smoking a joint with him. I think it was some sort of big milestone moment for him in our relationship, so I didn't have the heart to tell him I'd known for about 10 years at that point. Story 17. My parents have been divorced over a decade. It didn't happen until all the kids had completed school and moved out. They each have found someone else and are happy with their new life as far as I can tell. Neither one ever said anything to me about the divorce. Story 18. My dad thinks he is hiding his displeasure of my decision to not move back home after I graduate next semester. I love my dad and all, but I just don't want to go back home. Story 19. That my dad repeatedly cheating on my mom with women he worked with was a big part of what led to their divorce. My mom never brought that up because I think she wanted my brother and I to continue respecting and thinking well of our dad. But I knew. He wasn't even subtle about it. I distinctly remember a few times when I'd pick up the phone in our house only to hear my dad already on the line, engaging in flirty conversation with female strangers. All things considered, I gotta hand it to my mom for trying so hard to be the bigger person and not say anything that would turn us against our dad, even though he kinda deserved it. Story 20. They think I don't know about my dad's affair. I'm pretty sure I knew about for about 2 years before my mom did. Don't leave your email logged in on your kid's computer, especially if that's where your girlfriend is sending her nudes. Story 21. That one of my uncles didn't die from heart complications. He went how a lot of folks from the res and the projects go. Fell over in the gutter when he was drunk, broke his wrist, and froze to death in the winter of 2015. I think. All the kids were told that his heart gave out. His son died the following year, also of heart complications. Edit. To explain further, which I guess a few people need, my mother didn't want any of us getting drunk or stoned to deal with either of the funerals. Chemical dependency is a running theme in my family. Didn't stop anyone for either funeral. I personally thought it was a bit fucked to smoke a blunt with Charlie Jr.'s funeral program as the filter, but I was outvoted by my brothers. Story 22. When I was a kid, I found some documents in my mom's closet with her name, my name, and some other man's name who isn't my dad. It was a long time ago, so I don't remember what they said, but I'm pretty sure I have a different father to who I grew up with, or maybe I was under the custody of someone else. I've never felt connected to my dad, and this would explain it. Story 23. My dad had a second child, a son with another woman when he had me, but decided to stay with my mom. The guy is one of my best friends now. We are only 1 year apart. Story 24. Mom's cancer spread to her liver. They told me the biopsy came back benign. One of her friends let it slip casually, and I pretended I knew, then retreated to a restroom to lose my mind. I know they are trying to protect me, but I hate all these lies. Don't know who to trust anymore. Story 25. That my parents got married because my mom became pregnant with me. They divorced when I was 5, but as I try to learn more about them as people, they seem to be very guarded about their time together, and that period of life in general. Story 26. My mom told me when I was little and we'd play Scrabble, she'd put down bullshit made-up words and convinced me they were real, and I'd believe her. The double bullshit is she still tries it on and denies it. I'm just old enough to call putter. Story 27. Throwaway, cause my main account could identify me. When my dad was in his 20s, he served 9 years in prison for a felony burglary charge. He's completely reformed now and is a great person, but my parents never told me. When I was 12, I needed to take a picture of my birth certificate for a school project, so I went and got it from the box of important documents in my house. When I was looking for the birth certificate, I found the prison discharge papers stating the crimes with my dad's name on it. My parents still don't know I know. It's been a few years now. Story 28. I'm 99% sure my dad cheated on my stepmom, and that's related to why they're divorcing this year. I'm pretty sure he's waiting to introduce his new girlfriend to me. I love him, and I'm proud of who he is, but I'm ashamed that he can't keep it in his pants. Story 29. That my dad is and has always been a functioning alcoholic who is now showing the early stages of dementia or Alzheimer's from long-term use of alcohol. I have no doubt my mother will eventually have to put him in a home. Not because she can't take care of him, but he is incredibly social and would get really depressed if he just stayed at home. Me and my sister have talked about what will happen, but our parents are so much older than we are, in their 70s, and both of us are in our 20s. It would not surprise me if my mom has already picked out a place for him in the event he can no longer care for himself, which is crazy because he's physically really healthy, works out every day, runs marathons, just did a pretty extreme ski trip in Italy. So yeah, it's been kind of a looming secret that's becoming more apparent as time goes on. Story 30. Late to the game here, so I don't expect this to get attention, but it feels nice to get it off my chest. I've always known about how disappointed my parents are in me. I was a decent kid, but ever since high school, I've started to get more and more depressed, and my mental health has really taken a toll on me since then. They say they're supportive of me, and that they're proud of me when I get a D on a test cause I tried my best. But sometimes, they accidentally leak out their disappointment, like how my mom sometimes says she wishes how I wasn't such a burden, or when I overheard my dad say to my mom how he always knew I was stupid. At the end of the day, I tried my best, gave it my 110%, and I pushed myself to not want to kill myself and to love myself more. But man, does it hurt to know that the only people I really want validation from don't really think highly of me and act like they're proud of me. I just want to make them truly proud, even fully knowing how toxic and unfair they can be to me. In my twisted head, I just can't move forward, and I'm stuck in this obsession in wanting to make my parents proud and happy when I know that they will never see me as anything but a disappointment. Story 31. When I moved out of my mother's house and across the country, we had 3 cats. When I returned a couple months later, only 1 cat remained. She brushed off the disappearance of the other 2. This made me suspicious. I skimmed through emails she sent to her overseas boyfriend, whom she would no doubt confide in were she complicit in their disappearance. I learned that she took the 2 cats, drove out to the country, and deposited them on the side of the road. That was 15 years ago. She still believes that I don't know. Story 32. When I was 15, a girl who was in her early 20s reached out to me on Facebook. She sent me a long message saying that we were half-sisters on my dad's side. I was surprised, as I never knew I had a sibling. When I asked my parents about it, my mom was visibly irritated, and my dad made me block her and told me to never talk to her again. I did for a few months, but naturally I got back in touch with her. I found out my dad cheated on my mom, and my half-sister was the result. I never told my parents I knew. Me and my sister still keep in touch. Story 33. I am pretty sure my mom lied about not planning to get pregnant all 5 times. She has been on the pill for 3 decades. If I were on contraceptives that worked that bad, I would get something else instead. It's not like the pill is the only option. Story 34. My father doesn't know that I know about his mistress, her name, where she lives, how long they've been together, that he bought her a house in 2009, etc. I've quietly been stalking her. I wondered originally if we'd become friendly, but she seems rather unpleasant. My mother doesn't know that I know she abandoned her first child when he was a toddler. Everyone else believes her story that he died of scarlet fever. She doesn't know that I found him using those DNA kits. I'll never let her know that he went on to become a lawyer and a judge in another country. She'll die not knowing. There are many more things. Things that could send both of them to prison for many reasons. Mafia involvement, supermarket price fixing, contract breaches, even simple shoplifting. My parents are quite rich but also truly horrible, and I have collected a great deal of blackmail material. Story 35. My dad has a mistress. I honestly don't hate her, per se. She's really cute and I'm kind of impressed by it. My mom doesn't know about it, and I don't plan on telling her either. I understand why he's doing it. And to be honest, he's my favorite. And yes, I know I'm a terrible child. No need to say it. Story 36. They think I have no clue how they lied to me my entire life about my biological father. Turns out he had no idea I existed. I found him this year at the age of 29. My biological mom was apparently forced by threatening by my grandmother, my adoptive mother, to keep the pregnancy to herself because my father is half black. I now know I am a quarter black, a secret my mother would die if she knew I knew. Keeping this to secret to myself is becoming quite difficult. Story 37. My mom tried to hide from me that she was getting tested for cervical cancer. I overheard her talking about it one night outside her door. I sat and listened to the entire conversation after hearing the cancer part. I got really upset but didn't confront her about it. I've never heard anything about it since, so I assume it was just a scare. She has no idea that I know about it. Story 38. This might sound made up and I really wish it was, but I overheard my mom practically begging my dad to buy a gun and shoot me and pretend it was an accident. He said he doesn't like me either, but he wouldn't kill me. It still remains the hardest thing I have ever had to hear. It truly broke my heart. I was 16. I do not live with them anymore. They are awful parents and people who I have never agreed with about anything. I have a lot more stories about the fucked up they have done to me. And yes, I have called CPS, but my parents are master manipulators. Story 39. My dad never quit smoking. He was a smoker before we were born and hid it from me and my siblings. My older brother and I didn't find out until I was 18 and he 20. I guess I'm impressed with how sneaky he was. 3 years since we found out and he still hides it. Story 40. My mom is pretty self-conscious about not being useful anymore. She's smart, and when she was younger, she was the go-to person in our family when we needed financial or technical advice. Sometimes I call her and ask questions. Sometimes I already know the answer. Sometimes I don't know, but don't really need to know either. I know it makes her happy to feel helpful. Story 41. When my grandfather died, my dad inherited all the money and gave about 10K of it to one of my brothers. Not sure if he gave anything to my other brother. We are less close. I got nothing. Story 42. In the early days of AIM, I installed a program that recorded every AIM conversation and organized them by screen names into dated folders. This was almost 20 years ago on our family computer. Looking through my dad's stuff, I discovered he was chatting with other local women and did the whole ASL thing. I also found a picture he sent out where he was standing in front of a mirror in his underwear holding his. My parents were still technically together at the time. I asked him about other women and he denied it. I left it alone. He didn't know how much proof I had. Story 43. My mom thinks I don't know she got processed and charged with 96 counts of fraud today. She just opened her business and is now facing nearly 100 Class 5 felonies. Edit to add, she's used to court from past careers, teacher for violent offenders. And my grandparents have money, so she'll turn out better than most people would. I'm more worried about my brother, the person she was caretaker for, and his life after this. I just hope he ends up with someone who knows him. Downs, celiacs, unknown thyroid issues, and seizures are his biggest issues. His behavioral problems aren't any better than his physical ones. Story 44. That they're disappointed in me. I've pointedly asked once or twice and they fudge their way out of the conversation or change the subject. Every time. It's not that I've done anything wrong, not gone to college. I pretend to be straight and religious just so they aren't more disappointed in me. The problem is that I haven't lived my life how they imagined me to. I was a promising kid with an IQ of 152. Government tested me, not Facebook, very outgoing, and picked up sports and instruments alike with ease. I had a TBI when I was 10, and things got a whole lot harder for me. Prepubescent morphine addiction, got significantly stupider, and just generally lost myself. I'm doing fine, but I'm not curing cancer while kicking Nazis in the face before rushing off to my cello concerto, and that just doesn't sit right with them. I don't blame them, but I can't change no matter how much I want to. I just want them to be proud of me. Story 45. My mom thinks she keeps secrets, but every time she decides to tell me something, because I'm old enough to hear this now, she tells me something she has told me already. She is a character. Story 46. Not me, but my cousin. Her dad killed himself when she was 7, and she was told he fell off his crane and died in hospital a few days later. Only found out the truth when she was 15, and has been in a downward spiral since, currently in prison for prostitution. I don't blame the lie, just a storm of bad luck and bad decisions, but her life was so similar to mine until she lost her dad, and then it all went downhill for her. Story 47. To this day, my dad refuses to admit he was a pot-smoking hippie in the 60s, 70s. despite photo evidence and accounts from every other family member to the contrary. It's almost silly how defensive he is about it. Story 48. So this isn't a secret anymore, but it happened 2 years ago. My mom thought I didn't know she was engaged to her then girlfriend, now wife. She forgot she had me on her Facebook and changed her status to engaged. I was 16 and lived with her. Still have no idea what she was thinking. Story 49. I'm not sure if she's being secretive or just not sure herself, but my mother doesn't remember the identity of my biological father. 32 years old, and I have no idea who he is, and the rest of my family believe it's someone else. Story 50. I grew up thinking my uncle died from cancer when I was very young, because that's what my mother told me when I asked her many years ago. It was only recently that my father told me he shot himself, and my mother just can't talk about it. Story 51. My stepdad, minister, 70s, has been cheating on my mom, unemployed 60s, for the last 8 years at least. I saw him holding hands and getting close with his ex-wife at the movies, but he didn't see me. I don't even blame him, though. My mom bragged to me that she stopped sleeping with him 6 months after they got married, and that he just had to deal with it because he would get fired if he got divorced again. They're miserable together, but he's actually a good stepdad and treats my kids better than she does. If they ever divorce, she is going to be super pissed when he's still invited to holidays and birthdays. Hell, he can even bring his ex-wife. Story 52. A few days ago, for a honeymoon weekend, my mom and dad decided to ditch our sorry asses for a day and spend time with each other at a hotel. They said that they just wanted some time together and that they would get a fancy dinner together and stuff, but everyone knew that they were just looking for an opportunity to— no one said it, but everyone was thinking it. Story 53. Pretty sure my parents are swingers. When I was 13, I usually home alone in the morning after my parents left for work. All I had to do was get myself ready for school and get on the bus. Well, one morning I needed clean socks. Went into my parents' room to grab some from my dad's drawer. I found the socks along with this huge half-opened envelope. Being curious, I looked through and what I found blew my 13-year-old mind. First, there were catalogs for and toys. They had dog-eared pages and items circled like a wish list. Most of the stuff circled was swinging movies and stuff like that. Then I found letters in the envelope. There were maybe a dozen or so letters from different women, attached with Polaroids of themselves naked or scantily clad. All the letters were addressed to my parents, thanking them for a good time and asking when they can do it again. At first, I thought it must be some kind of junk mail that would come into their P.O. box. Then I realized all the return addresses were from cities we used to live in. Then I realized again, why the does mom and dad still have a P.O. box anyway? To my knowledge, they don't know I know, and I'm pretty sure my sisters don't know either. Over the years, the pieces started to fit together even more so. I've just kind of accepted it. Story 54. I'm the parent keeping the secret. My son's father, my ex-husband, committed suicide by running in front of an SUV one night. I told my son his father was accidentally hit by this SUV while his dad was crossing the street. He worshipped his father, and I won't ever let him know otherwise if I can help it. My son was 11 years old when his dad died. He shouldn't have to ever deal with that pain and grief trying to understand why his dad committed suicide. Story 55. That they hide money from each other, and it's the biggest reason they fight. It's honestly very stupid, and part of the reason why I told my husband, at the time fiancé, that if he couldn't trust me knowing his finances that I couldn't marry him. Lucky for me, he has no shame, and we can laugh about our horrible financial decisions and move past them. Story 56. Obligatory. This occurred between 2009-15. Both my parents developed an opiate addiction through grinding and snorting my dad's OxyContin, which was prescribed for his injured back. Sometimes I'd find them passed out in bed with a pill grinder and a pen tube on their bedside table. I never brought it up with them for years. Then, one day, I was just going through some of my stuff and found out that my grandfather's deceased ring was missing. Had no idea where it went. Asked my parents, and neither of them had a clue. The next day, one of my good friends who worked at a local convenience store told me that my dad had come into the store kind of delirious and tried to pawn off a ring to them for cash. I confronted my dad about stealing my ring, and he denied it until I brought up my friend's account. Said he needed the money for bills. And that's when I said, "No, you were going to use that money to buy pills, weren't you?" The look on his face is something I will never forget. It twisted into something raw and hungry and filled with rage. In that moment, he ceased being my dad and was an addict. It hurt to be looked at with such unabated hatred. He snarled a "fuck you" at me and went downstairs. Moved out later that year. Took me a good long while to readjust. Happy ending, though. My parents split up and they got clean. Don't really talk to them much nowadays. Story 57. My parents, divorced, don't speak to each other, and maternal grandparents all think I'm gay and are keeping the fact they know from me as they're waiting for me to come out. They've all asked my sister but not me directly. I'm not gay. Story 58. 1. My mom had a daughter before my sister and I. I found the birth certificate years ago. She was a stillbirth according to the other document attached. I don't want to upset her, so I'll just let her keep believing no one knows. 2. My mom also lied about being married to my dad. He was actually still married to his first wife when I was born. His first wife cheated after almost 30 years of marriage. So, I can't blame him for getting a PYT. I was born in '87, they got married in '89. Public records? Mom. Geez. Story 59. I'm the least favorite child. It's not a problem, and honestly, I agree with it. I'm autistic and went through a lot growing up. My two siblings are the ones who will succeed in life. Then she had a fourth child. So that took me from third to fourth favorite. Doesn't matter though. The only thing I care about is that my siblings live a great life. Story 60. I know perfectly well they're homophobes and donate to all sorts of homophobic organizations, even though they know I am. Things get mysteriously quiet when we talk about charity, but I remember my mom screaming, red-faced about how all the gays should be exterminated, etc. I've also seen all the emails they get from explicitly homophobic charities. Story 61. My mom has a huge, like easily 9+ inches. It's really disturbing to think about. I found it on accident and picked it up because I thought it was an umbrella, like a closed one. Then I felt the texture and realized it definitely wasn't an umbrella. Story 62. My brother pushed me out of a window when I was 3 and he was 4. I was dancing on our toy box and wouldn't let him into it. He got mad and pushed me from our 3rd-story apartment window. My parents have always said that I fell, but my brother and I both remember what happened. Story 63. My mother did shrooms while she was 2 weeks pregnant with me, but she didn't know at the time, and it's not every day that the Grateful Dead comes to play in Vermont. How did I find this out? Well, Daddy got drunk one night and just randomly told me and my older sister. Also found out that Daddy did coke at one point. Story 64. Not sure which they think they've got locked down better. About my paternal grandparents preventing my mother leaving the state with me when I was a baby, causing her to miss out on a college education paid for by her grandparents, and a decent life for us. Or if it's that the she hooked up with during their divorce molesting me. Parents got back together after that, but I bounced between grandparents' homes and wasn't raised by them. Story 65. I don't think my mom knows that I know her parents, my grandparents, got married because my grandma got knocked up. Considering their old age, this was a huge fucking deal back in the day. Also that they had an abusive relationship when they were younger. Considering they're scummy and pretty miserable all the time is sad. They got married because they had to, and not because they loved each other. Fuck old people's social norms, they caused more harm than good. Story 66. Fun stuff. This actually came out already, but my mom as a teen ran off with an older guy, was the subject of a large search on the news at the time, came back, had a kid, given up for adoption, then kept secret for over 50 years. Story 67. My parents are your basic conservative Christian folk. They politically lean more liberal, but it wasn't uncommon for me to come home to find mom listening to Christian music and doing needlework. Dad went to a Christian college and got a degree in religious studies. Y'all get the picture. Turns out that my mom's business is a front for her being and my dad has a bunch of sugar babies. Mom knows. Sometimes joins in. My sister found out about dad's sugar babies first by snooping through his emails. I found out about mom by checking Backpage.com. They're still great parents and love us a lot. However, it definitely caused some huge trust issues there. Story 68. That between me and my little brother who has Down syndrome, he is the favorite. Like, come on, I'm 24. And I'm getting deaf really quickly, so I need a very expensive hearing aid, and the only thing they say is, we don't have that amount of money, but they spend the same amount every 2 months with my brother and his doctor visits.